No, sir.
Are you aware of this Democratic Congress pulling up any legislation to deal with these issues this month, rather than going home, but yet calling Congress back on Saturday to have a hearing, or I'm sorry, have a vote before we even had a hearing on Saturday? Are you aware of that, or is this the only thing that we've been voting on in August?
I haven't been following the agenda of Congress that much. I've had my own issues to deal with, but I know this
Well,
is...
I appreciate that. There hasn't been that much to follow, so I appreciate that. Are we discussing, for example, human trafficking? Will that be discussed today? I've been asking for a hearing on the scourge of human trafficking, what we can do to stop that. I've been asking for a hearing on that for over a year. We're not having that hearing today, are we? We're having a hearing on this topic. Is that right?
I think we would be sticking to Postal Service matters.
That's right. Look, Mr. DeJoy, I appreciate you being here in front of the committee. I think the fact of the matter is pretty clear. This is a political exercise. This is a show hearing. I've already been seeing out there on social media some of the difficulties, the technology and everything else. The fact of the matter is we're jamming through this for theater. We're doing a hearing on the Monday after a vote on Saturday that has no prayer of becoming law. And this is exactly what the American people are sick of. They want the Postal Service to operate, and you're trying to work on trying to make it operate. We should have hearings about the health and the financial status of the Postal Service. We should work on legislation to improve it. There are bipartisan efforts to do that. We should actually roll our sleeves up and do that work. But by the way, I would say the same thing about the PPP. I was proud to work with Dean Phillips in June to pass bipartisan legislation to help small businesses. Why aren't we doing that right now? Why aren't we doing that today? That is our job. And there are people out there who are struggling. They can't make a check. They can't pay their mortgage. They're wondering where they're going to have the revenue in order to survive for a business they built up or to be able to employ the people that have worked for them for years. That's what we should be working on, Madam Chairwoman. And I would just posit that this is a waste of time for the United States Congress. The American people are sick of it, and we should be allowing the Postal Service to go back to doing its job here. We should be focusing on doing ours. With that, I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding in his comments, and just as a point of information, the Democratic Congress did pass the HEROES Act on May 15th that did fund all kinds of help to people, and that is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk as well as this bill. So he has a choice. He can move a standalone or he can move the HEROES Act. I now recognize Congressmember Raskin. Mr. Raskin, you are now
Thank you, Madam Chair.
recognized.
I've got diabetic constituents who are waiting for insulin. I've got constituents with cancer waiting for chemo drugs to come in. But this headline really took the cake for me. Rats reported feeding on packages of rotted fruit and meat as Postmaster General's cutbacks unleash chaos at California's mail centers. This is from not some haven of liberal fake news, Business Insider magazine. Mr. Postmaster General, why do you celebrate on-time departure of postal vehicles if the deterioration in service that you regret has caused letters and packages left stacking up in the mail centers? Should we be celebrating vehicles going out on time if they don't have people's packages and letters on them and their prescription drugs?
So we're concerned with every late delivery and every package buildup, and there are a lot of contributing factors to why, and
okay.
where.
And we got your.
But let me finish.
Yeah.
The process is an integral part of delivering the mail and cost effectively.
Okay.
Okay.
President Trump called the post office.
Why would we? The alternative is to run trucks late and run extra trips. Extra trips were empty also. Thousands of them empty.
Okay, forgive me because I've got limited time. I can't allow you to filibuster here. President Trump called the post office a joke. Is it a joke?
Postal Service is not a joke.
Mr. Joy, if I wanted to become a letter carrier or a mail handler, a postal clerk, would you hire me without a background check?
We have a process that I do believe includes a background check, so no.
Yeah, it's compelled, right? Everybody's got to take a background check, except they didn't have one for you.
That's not true. I had background checks.
You did have a background check? So
background checks. I got secret clearance. I had FBI background checks. I've had everything.
Okay, so you would be willing to release the background check?
No. Why would I release a background check?
Well, that's interesting. Let me go to Mr. Duncan about that. Mr. Duncan, would you be willing to to allow Russell Reynolds to turn over the file from this process? Mr. Duncan? All right, well, let me come back to you, Mr. DeJoy. The former chairman of the vice chairman of the Postal Board of Governors, Mr. Williams, who was also the Inspector General, also reported that you didn't come through the normal Russell Reynolds interview process, but you were apparently the product of different nominations by different political people. And the astonishing thing about what he said last week was that when you finally were brought in for that first interview, you basically interviewed the selection panel rather than them interviewing you, to the point that one of the members joked that they had better ask you at least one question so that it couldn't be said that it wasn't a real interview. Now, you were also reported stating that you weren't sure that you wanted to accept the job and you needed to essentially interview them about what it entailed. What gave you the confidence that the job was basically yours for the asking when you finally met the selection committee?
Sir, I did not think the job was mine for the asking. I don't know what Mr. Williams' contention is or what his problem is with me.
He was the Inspector General for 13 years at the Postal Service and the Vice Chair. Well,
he's authored probably part of the reports that have been stacking up that this committee hasn't done.
What do you make of the former chairman of the Postal Board of Governors, Mr. Feynman, calling Treasury Secretary Mnuchin's involvement in the selection process absolutely unprecedented?
Stephen Mnuchin had nothing to do with my selection. Okay, I was called by Russell.
Did you talk to Secretary Mnuchin about taking the job? There was a report that you had lunch together to discuss this.
It's totally inaccurate and outrageous.
You've never talked to him about, but before taking the job, you never talked to him about taking the job?
I talked to him about the job after I received the offer. I did not accept the offer immediately.
Okay, but you never spoke to him before about his soliciting your interest in the job, or?
He did not solicit any interest. I kept my interest, which, as you identified, I did not know that I had an interest. I had a perfectly good life prior to this, but I was interested in helping, and I was called by Russell Reynolds out of the blue.
One of the reasons that we have background checks, and I'll be very interested with your permission and Mr. Duncan's permission to see your background check, is that we identify patterns of misconduct or potential conflicts of interest that are out there. Now, you had...
Sir, I have no patterns of misconduct in my background.
Let me finish my question, if I could.
Madam Chair,
one of your businesses was called New Breed Logistics, later XPO Logistics, which has contracts with the Postal Service stretching back many years. Okay, well, the question is, they identified problems with contract performance and billing practices in the contract file. Would you consent to releasing that contract file so everyone can see what your business?
I don't even know what you're speaking about.
Are you not aware of XPO Logistics, which?
I am aware of XPO.
Okay, so do you have $30 million invested?
Time, Madam Chair. He's gone way over his time.
Do you have $30 million invested?
He doesn't.
I have a significant investment in XPO Logistics, which I vetted before with the ethics department of the Postal Service, and I was given specific types of guidelines that I needed to adhere to. It's a very, very small part of the Postal Service business I have nothing to do with. And I comply with all ethical requirements, and we have an OIG investigation. I guess they'll get to everything that you're interested in, and we will see what will happen.
Well, Mr. Raskin's time has expired.
To be clarified in recess.
Can we test my microphone in recess?
Sure, please, otherwise we
That's it. Can you do a mic check? Is that what we're going to do next? We had an issue.
The recess is over. We are now back to work, and our next Representative Massey, you are now recognized.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can't see you, but we
Okay.
can hear you.
Uh-oh, you can't see me.
Okay, turn on your,
Can you,
there you are, there you are. We see you and we can hear you, okay?
okay.
Mr. Massey is now
All right.
recognized.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record two press releases from the U.S. Post Office. The first one's from April 28, 2011. The second one is from February 23, 2012.
Without objection.
All right, I want to read some excerpts from these press releases and then ask Chairman Duncan to respond to the press releases because these are from Kentucky. In 2011, the Post Office announced, and I'll read this, as a result of a study begun in September 2010, the Postal Service has made the decision to move mail processing operations from the Ashland Processing and Distribution Facility to the Charleston, West Virginia Processing and Distribution Facility. What this means is here in Eastern Kentucky, when we mail our next door neighbor, the envelope goes to Charleston, West Virginia before it comes back to our next door neighbor. I want to read from this other press release from the U.S. Post Office, the Kentuckiana District. It says, and this is February 23rd, 2012, as a result of studies begun 5 months ago, the Postal Service has made the decision to move all mail processing operations from Bowling Green, Kentucky, moved to Nashville, Compton, Kentucky, Elizabethtown, Kentucky, Hazard, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. Our second largest city lost their mail processing facility in 2012. Paducah, Kentucky, moved to Evansville, Indiana, and Somerset, Kentucky, Knoxville, Tennessee. So this was in 2012. This was an election year, and this was while Obama was president and Biden was vice president. I want to read a quote from Chief Operating Officer Megan Brennan at the time. The decision to consolidate mail processing facilities recognizes the urgent need to reduce the size of the national mail processing network to eliminate costly underutilized infrastructure. Consolidating operations is necessary if the Postal Service is to remain viable to provide mail service to the nation. Now, the Democrats have cooked up this conspiracy theory that the post office is now somehow going to be at fault for disenfranchising voters or suppressing votes because, and the media is complicit in this. They've shown video of mail sorting equipment being moved out of facilities. Well, here I've just mentioned 10 facilities in Kentucky that were shut down in an election year. And so I want to ask Chairman Mike Duncan, Mr. Duncan, do you believe this in 2012 was part of some conspiracy to disenfranchise voters in the 2012 election or part of some conspiracy to keep people from getting their medication or Social Security checks?
Congressman, I have no knowledge of the conspiracy that would keep people from voting or getting their Social Security checks. But as a resident of that area, I know that it's added to the number of days it takes to send or receive a letter.
Right. And you, I believe you know the Chief Operating Officer Megan Brennan. She was the CEO in 2010 and then became Postmaster General. Do you question her motives in the course of these operations?
No, I worked very closely with Megan Brennan when she was the chief of this organization. She has great integrity. She knows the system. She's been an operations person. She was a letter carrier. She worked her way up. She leads Post Office Blue.
And she has a business degree from MIT, I would add. So this wasn't a part of any kind of conspiracy then. It was a part of realigning the infrastructure of the post office to the changing needs of the U.S. customer. And I just want to close by highlighting some irony and hypocrisy. Postmaster General LaJoy, how long will the post office be funded? If there's no more transfers of cash to the post office, how long can you operate?
Sir, would you turn on your mic, please?
Late 2021.
Okay, late 2021. So at least for one more year. I hope that members of this committee are aware that the U.S. government ceases to be funded on September 30th of this year. So we're holding a hearing about a post office that's funded for fully another year. Meanwhile, we're not even in town because Speaker Pelosi isn't concerned that government funding ends on September 30th. Everything but the post office shuts down on September 30th at midnight if we don't do something. Also, one other element of irony and hypocrisy, our Democratic governor shut down 95% of the voting precincts in the state, and now Democrats are somehow trying to blame the post office for disenfranchising voters. And with that, I will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We now recognize Congressman Ruda.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let's level set. For the thick-headed individuals that don't understand why we are here today, let me sum it up for you. First and foremost, mail is being delivered late at the expense of those who need prescriptions, at the expense of small businesses who need the supplies to stay in business or reopen for business, for Social Security recipients and veterans who need their benefits. That's the first reason. The second reason, we got a president of the United States who says that mail-in ballots are fraudulent, and if he doesn't win the election, it's because it was fraudulent. We know that's not true. We know that's a lie, and that lie continues to be continued by members in this committee on the other side of the aisle. Third, we know from a memo from Mr. DeJoy to 46 states telling them they should be worried about receiving mail-in ballots to their voters on time and for them to be returned back in time to be counted. And fourth, we're here because the United States Postal Service has requested financial help from this institution. Let me turn to my questions. Unlike any private enterprise, the Postal Service has a universal service obligation to deliver mail to virtually every address in the United States, regardless if it's profitable or not. The Postal Service also has a ridiculous mandate to pre-fund in 10 years' time 75 years of retiree health benefits, unlike any other private or public institution. Mr. DeJoy, in your testimony, you stated that you are against the pre-funding mandate. The Trump-appointed Board of Governors, postal workers, and senators on both sides of the aisle are against that mandate. As you know, there is a bipartisan bill sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk that would eliminate the pre-funding mandate and free up tens of billions of dollars for the U.S. Postal Service. Here's some free business advice. Pick up the phone, please call Mitch McConnell, because one vote and one stroke of a pen by this president would free up billions of dollars for the U.S. Postal Service to be able to accomplish the opportunity to revitalize that organization for decades to come. I have some questions about your business plan. It's standard practice as an executive to come in, meet with your team, and develop a strategic plan before executing operational changes. This was the plan that was released in May, just before you became Postmaster General. Did you make any written modifications to this plan since you have taken office?
No, first of all, sir, you're incorrect in my position on the pre-funding of the health care. In my written statement that
I know you support it.
I support it.
Yes, I said that. Yes, you do support it. I recognize that. But back to my question, have you made any modifications to this business plan?
Well, I'm working on making modifications to that business plan.
Yes, in fact, on August 13th, developing a strategic plan to achieve operational excellence and financial stability. Is that plan that you're working on, would it usurp this plan?
If approved by the Board of Governors, it would. And I must add, we do need to identify that the legislation also requires the Postal Service to be self-sustaining, and it has not been self-sustaining for the last.
And that's why getting rid of the pre-mandate is so important. But I just want to make sure that we are working under a written plan of some kind. If you have made any written modifications in memos to team members, will you provide this committee with that information so we know how you have modified this 5-year plan?
When we come out with a plan,
Well, surely you've got memoranda and other documents floating around, right? You can give us a draft, can't you?
I would not.
You can't give us a draft? I mean, we just got the report with the KPI showing that you're down 10% nationally when we know that in battleground areas it's down even more. So you were able to get that to us late. Can you get us that information as requested?
Probably not.
Let me ask you this. Let's turn to the impact you have had with the internal communications that show senior managers not to even plug in the previously disconnected machines without approval from headquarters. Mail processing equipment and blue collection boxes will remain where they are. Will you tell your workers and the American public right now that USPS employees can plug in disconnected machines?
I'm unaware of the directive that you're speaking about.
Well, it's an internal communication from
I got
the
6
USPS. So you will then allow them to plug in machines to be able to do their job.
I'm not going to agree to something I'm unaware of or the memo that you speak.
But you know how absolutely insane this is. This is like telling Jamba Juice they can't plug in the blenders to do their job.
Well, there must be a reason. I didn't do it, but the organization has.
But you're the
reasons why.
head of the unit. You're the head of the business. The buck stops with you.
The buck on what machine gets plugged in? That's outrageous statement.
The fact that you're down over 10% nationally in service
It has nothing to
metrics.
do with a plugged-in machine anywhere.
Gentleman's time
I
has
yield back.
expired. The
Thank you,
gentleman
Madam
can
Chair.
answer the question if he. We now recognize Congressman Brocana. Oh, excuse me, Heiss. Congressman Heiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just bring up, Madam Chair, if I may, the fact that you allowed Mr. Raskin to go significantly over his time while at the same time cutting off Mr. Roy is not going unnoticed. And I think Mr. Roy's point regarding the HEROES Act, that it was $3.4 trillion of swamp spending and did not even extend the PPP, which was what it was supposed to do. But what the HEROES Act did include was universal mail-in ballots, no voter ID for all those ballots, ballot harvesting. It's funny to me that the HEROES Act, which was supposed to be about COVID help and relief, did not extend PPP, but it did have a whole lot of voting reform in it that actually brings us into the conversation here today. Mr. Joy, let me just, I think you would agree with me, would you not, that the sanctity of the voting box, the ballot box, is a paramount issue for Americans. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure all of us would. Now, in 2017, there was an investigation by the Office of Special Counsel that concluded that the United States Postal Service improperly coordinated with the Postal Workers Union in support of Hillary Clinton. And the investigation, the OSC's investigation, went on and stated that it was a systematic violation of the Hatch Act that was involved. And in fact, many postal workers were required to work overtime to make up for the absence of all of that. It is also very interesting that the union we are referring to is the National Association of Letter Carriers, which just 10 days ago endorsed Biden for president. Let me ask you, how many fraudulent votes are necessary for it to be considered too many?
I don't know, sir. I guess one.
I would say one. We don't want fraudulent votes. There's no reason for us to have that. Your predecessor, Ms. Brennan, committed to Congress to fully implement some of the recommendations, in fact, all the recommendations from OSC to avoid future Hatch violations. So I'd like to ask you, what kind of changes have you made to prevent these type of violations from taking place in the future?
Congressman, that is not a focus I've had in my 70 days, but I will take a look at the status of that initiative and get back to you.
Okay, I would appreciate you getting back with us. You know, there's no question in my mind that the vast majority of USPS workers are faithful workers. They're honest, dedicated public servants. But that being said, what the OSC has identified is, without question, many cases of political bias. And in fact, just lay this out, when you have a union that consists of 300,000 workers, and that union comes out and endorses a candidate, in this case Biden, and then that union is supposed to be expected to accurately handle and deliver ballots to both parties fairly, does that raise any concerns for you at all?
Sir, I respect everybody's, right to support candidates and donate to candidates. I have done so myself for 20 years, so in my mind, it doesn't raise any awareness on the concern with regard to postal workers and their initiatives.
I respect the rights of individuals too.
The Postal Service has 650,000 people, and we will have, like the rest of the American society, we will have people that don't pay attention to the laws. But for the most part,
Mr. DeJoy,
I
I've
believe
got
in
less than
the
30
ability to
seconds.
donate
I respect
and support.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your answers, and I respect the right for people to vote and support who they want to as well. But this is a case where you have 300,000 workers, a union that has endorsed Biden, and there must be in place some sort of mechanism to ensure that the handling of those ballots and all political material, election material, is properly handled and not in a biased way. And I look forward to you responding to us in the next week or so.
Yes,
I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Congressman Rokana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for being here. I want to see if we can find some common ground to resolve some of the differences. Can you begin by sharing with the American people and this committee the unofficial motto of the Postal Service?
No rain nor snow, that sleet nor hail will make our delivery.
Yes. It's about service, correct? Not about profit. Do you know how many veterans serve in the Postal Service? About
100,000.
Correct. Do you know what percentage of veterans rely on the Postal Service for their prescription medicine?
I don't know.
It's a high number. It's about 80% of veterans. So I guess I want to ask you this. Our Defense Department, we don't tell them you have to go sell weapons to make revenue to serve the American people. We don't say that about our health service or the National Institute of Health. Why should we have a different standard for the Postal Service? Why do you have to go make a profit instead of just serving the American people?
Sir, it's an interesting and good question, and it's not that we need to make a profit. It's to be self-sustaining, which means at least cover your costs.
But why? It's such a small.
I'm not a legislator. I'm the Postmaster
Do
General.
you know? Do you know the history? Do you remember the time in the Postal Service history where that wasn't a requirement?
I do, in the 70s.
Actually, it was from 1840 to 1970. We funded the Postal Service. We didn't require them to make a profit because we thought people should, in rural America and other places, and our veterans should serve. And one of the reasons people serve in the Postal Service who've served in our military is they view it as public service. Now, I appreciated one point you made, which is you assume that those who disagree with you have a legitimate difference, a legitimate perspective. Your perspective is that these mail sorting machines aren't required because packages need to be delivered and open up floor space. It's your testimony that you didn't direct it, correct? Who directed it?
I have not done an investment. It came probably through our operation. It's been a long-term initiative.
So you don't know who directed it? You don't know who implemented it?
Well, there's hundreds of them around the country in different places. It was an initiative within the organization that preceded me.
Okay, so your perspective is this is necessary to make efficiency of packages. You understand that there are millions of people in America who have the opposite view, who are concerned that this may slow down the delivery of mail. Do you have any sense of how much it would cost to restore these machines?
No,
Would it be more than $10 billion?
More than what?
$10 billion?
$10 billion?
Yeah, no, right?
No.
More than $1 billion?
It'd be less than $10 billion.
Less than $1 billion?
I would assume so.
Okay,
It's
so
only
here's my
700
question.
machines.
Let's stipulate that you may be right about the efficiency. I disagree with you, but let's just stipulate that. Now, we have Donald Trump, the president, tweeting out yesterday that he's up in the polls. He thinks he's going to win. Nate Silver thinks Biden is going to win. I think everyone in this room can agree on one thing. Whoever wins, the American people should have confidence in that result. So if it cost less than $1 billion, regardless of whether it's efficient or not, what is the harm in just putting those machines back until Election Day just for the peace of mind, for the confidence of the American people?
Well, first of all, sir, we've heard all the statistics about the mail-in and the votes and so forth, right? And we don't need the machines to process the election. But you make a statement about for $1 billion, if we just gave you $1 billion, you're not going to give us $1 billion.
So
you're going to make a request. You have no way of getting us $1 billion. We haven't been funded in 10 years. You can't pass any legislation. Can't pass any legislation that helps.
If I could just finish this point, if we give you the money. Do you see my point?
It's a hypothetical. I'm not willing to.
I guess
you haven't given us any money.
What
you
is
haven't
the
given
harm?
us any legislation.
But what is the
and
harm?
you're sitting here accusing me of things with regard to this machinery as a committee.
I haven't accused you of anything.
And it's a big statement.
I'm trying to understand.
I
think I'm trying to understand what most Americans are trying to understand. What is the harm in putting these machines, even if the machines in your perspective don't do anything, what is the harm to do it till Election Day?
In Washington, it makes plenty sense. To me, it makes none.
You haven't explained why. And then final question
because they're not needed. That's why.
But if it will restore people's faith in a democracy and avoid a polarized electorate, I would think...
Get me the billion, and I'll put the machines in.
Okay, well, that's a commitment. We'll find a way to get you the money. The last question I have for you is, Reagan said trust but verify. I understand you've committed to the American people that you're going to have these delivered in time. Can you give us a specific and detailed plan and submit that to Congress on how you're going to make sure that the ballots get delivered in time?
I need to get back to you. If there's a plan that we can, it's normal processing procedures plus enhanced processing procedures around the election. I can probably give you some type of summarized objectives that we'll try to fulfill.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the commitment of $1 billion, and you'll put the machines back in a plan. So thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Congressman Comer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you went over 4 minutes, so I may go over a few minutes, and I hope you'll indulge me in my questioning. Mr. DeJoy, thank you again for being here today. I'm sorry for some of the rhetoric that you've had to endure over your first 60 days in office. That's something I want to remind everyone. You've been Postmaster General for around 60 days. Is that correct?
70 today.
Now, I want to make this very clear to the American people who are watching this committee hearing. You report to the Postal Board of Governors. Is that correct?
I do, sir.
And the Postal Board of Governors is a bipartisan board comprised of both Democrats and Republicans. Is that correct?
It is, sir.
And its makeup is that way because of the statute passed by Congress requiring a bipartisan Board of Governors, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, if there's one thing I hope my Democrat colleagues learn today is that you report to the Board of Governors, not the President of the United States. Now, there's been a lot of rhetoric by my friends on the Democrat side of the aisle pertaining to all of the changes that have been made. In fact, I want to reference a tweet by Representative DeFazio. I assume this is a photo op where he's chained himself to one of the blue boxes that have been in the news a lot lately. In your opening testimony, Mr. DeJoy, you said you didn't order the removal of the blue boxes, sorting equipment, or the reduction of overtime. Can you explain to us who did and what that process was? Because I think it's important for the American people to know, because there are a lot of Democrats here, even though they've talked about politics and they've talked about the fact that the president wants to sabotage the election, the Democrats are using this as a political ploy. They are spinning this to try to benefit politically. In fact, Representative DeFazio has received $32,000 from the Postal Workers Union since 2012. So I'm sure his campaign donors probably appreciated that photograph. But again, if you wouldn't mind telling us about the process briefly of the removal of the blue boxes, who ordered them, and how that came about.
So this is a long-standing thing that's been going on in the Postal Service for a long time. The fact that I'm here at the committee to talk about boxes and things, I'd much rather take the time to talk about the legislation we require to help get us into a sustainable, position, and other matters that concern the Postal Service. It had nothing to do with boxes or machines or restricting overtime or throwing the election or anything.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. On average, about 3,100 collection boxes a year over the past 7 years have been taken offline, dating back to the time when Obama was president. Is that correct?
It's been a long time, yes.
Am I correct to say that
Yes.
when during the Obama-Biden administration, they removed 12,000 blue boxes? Is that correct?
I think 35, I think there was a big, it's just hard for me to associate box removal with the President of the United States.
Right.
So you guys can do that here. I have a hard time.
Mr. Postmaster General, do you remember the Democrats calling for the then Postmaster General to resign because President Obama removed 12,000 blue boxes? Do you remember that?
I don't think I ever recall.
I don't either.
Request for Postmaster General to resign.
So let's be very clear. Removing the sorting machines, removing the blue boxes that were removed, they won't affect the Postal Service's capacity to handle ballots this election season. You've testified as to that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Now, the Democrats want to portray you as implementing new policies because of the false narrative that the president wants to somehow sabotage the election. Is that narrative true?
I am not engaged in sabotaging the election.
Absolutely false. As a matter of fact, aren't you planning on voting by mail? Did someone tell me that?
I am, yes.
So you have full confidence that when your ballot is in the mail, it will get to the appropriate election official on time, obviously, correct?
Yes, sir.
Will you pledge here today that the Postal Service will do its best to return all ballots this election on time?
I do, sir.
What would you tell Americans who are concerned about something happening to their ballot once they put it in the mail this election season? What would you tell Americans? Because they've seen a lot of that from my colleagues on the Democrat side. This has been their spin since the Russian hoax fell flat, since the impeachment sham died in the Senate. Every conspiracy theory to date that the Democrats have used to try to hurt the president has fallen flat. So this is the new flavor of the day. And it's had the consequences of putting a lot of Americans concerned that if they drop that absentee ballot in the mail, that it's not going to get to the post, it's not going to get to the election official. How can you relieve their fears that the Democrats have caused?
The American people have the commitment of the 650,000 women and men of the United States Postal Service that we will do everything within our power and structure to deliver ballots on time. But again, we remind them to request your ballot early and vote early.
And you know, it's really discouraging to hear the rhetoric from the Democrats about this whole postal issue. My grandmother was a rural mail carrier in Tennessee, spent her whole career as a rural mail carrier. The men and women I know in the Postal Service work extremely hard, and they deserve better than the rhetoric and the postal bashing that has been coming from the other side, all for political purposes. We all want to see the post office succeed, especially in a district like mine, a very rural district, that still hasn't recovered from what Congressman Massey mentioned, the changes that Obama made when he took the sorting facilities out of Bowling Green, Kentucky and Paducah, Kentucky. But I'll close my question with this. This is a sad day for the Oversight Committee. The Oversight Committee is responsible for identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. The Oversight Committee is supposed to be responsible for making government transparent and accountable. Postmaster DeJoy, you have come here with a sterling background. You are one of the most qualified Postmaster Generals we've ever had with your background in the logistics business. It's an honor for the federal government to have you trying to reform the post office. But the bill that the Democrats rushed through Saturday without even having a committee hearing on it, that bill ties your hands. And it also gives $25 billion to the Postal Service, which I find ironic because Mr. McGovern, in the Rules Committee markup on Friday, said he didn't trust you. We've had a couple of other Democrats say that they didn't have confidence in you, but they gave you a $25 billion blank check with no strings attached. They've tied your hands to where you can't make any needed reforms. That's not what this committee is supposed to be about. I apologize as a minority member of this committee. I hope that we can do better in the next Congress. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and I recognize myself for a point of personal privilege and information. The bill that the House passed that I authored that bill after the Postmaster General came forward with changes to the post office that slowed the mail down. It does not in any way hinder any effort to make the post office more efficient and effective.
Madam Chair.
I also funded the post office because it deserves to be funded. It's a national treasure. It's a national service. And I now recognize Mr. Mfume for 5 minutes. Mr. Mfume. Mr. Mfume, would you turn on your mic, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of us represent dearly the people we represent, so in no way, and I want to assure members of this committee that this is some sort of hoax. We are here, Mr. DeJoy, as you might imagine, because we've been hearing from the people who hire us, people who live across this country in our districts. And so for me, that's the people of Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Howard County, Maryland. Just like all of my colleagues have others, I'm sure, who've complained. And I just want to keep this focus on the face of those people. These are senior citizens like you and like me. They've worked hard. They're at a point in their life where they depend, like they've always had depended, on the mail. Some of them have high blood pressure. They wait for their medications. Others have heart trouble. They wait for their medications. These are citizens, men and women, who put on a uniform in various wars and conflicts and represented us and rely daily on the mail for their checks, their VA checks, for their medicines. These are small business people, like you used to be, and many of these members of the committee may have been, who watch their small business compete now, not being able to keep abreast of basic things that they rely on to come through the mail. And then they're just average citizens, somebody who wants to pay a bill because they don't believe in the internet and they believe in writing an old-fashioned check, and then they're told by the company that they're being charged now with a late fee because it didn't arrive on time. So these are real stories. And when the mail slows down, it has a disparate impact on communities, and particularly on communities of color around this country. These changes, Mr. DeJoy, I assume are changes that you have vetted. I'm talking about the ones you've implemented with the Board of Governors. Is that correct?
The change, the organizational change, and the requirement to, in the initiative to have the trucks leave on time are within my authority, but I had discussed them.
Well, let me ask this. Major changes are required to have an advisory opinion. Is that correct, before they're submitted to the Board of Governors?
There's not a change like the major. There is some level of change that is closing plants and so forth. We need to go to the PRC.
And do you have analytics to sort of justify the changes that you've made? And if so, could you provide them at a later date to this committee?
I need to get back to you on that.
Okay, it's my understanding that the removal of mailboxes, whether it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or last week, required density studies. Is that still the case?
I believe it is.
Could you supply to this committee the density studies for the last 3 months, because there's been an accelerated removal of boxes, an accelerated removal of sorting machines, 671, to which you said earlier you would not put back online. And I'm I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't believe that Humpty Dumpty fell. I think he was pushed. And when I see these sort of things back up in such a way that we get your report, dated August 12th, that says, yes, there has been an 8% decrease in mail arriving on time, a 9% decrease in periodicals arriving on time, and a decrease in virtually all other classifications, it just makes some of us a little suspect, and I'm sure you would understand that. Let me ask you, are you familiar with the expedited to street afternoon sorting program?
I am.
It was introduced on the 25th of July. It affects 1,200 zip codes across the United States. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that it affected a lot of zip codes. Yeah.
Are you aware that it shakes up longstanding procedures at the post office?
I'm aware of what the process was and whether it was longstanding procedures. The intention of the plan is to adjust for the decrease in mail volume and get back on schedule. And that was a pilot. It wasn't a change. It was a pilot program to marry up the delivery, the carrier delivery to homes and businesses with the schedule that of incoming mail from the destination.
Are you aware that the National Association of Letter Carriers filed an official grievance against that program?
I am, but I will tell you, before that pilot went off, we had a discussion with the union leadership, and they were amenable to rolling out the program.
And just before I yield back my time, sir, what would you say to those veterans, those senior citizens, those average Americans, and those small business people who have been disproportionately impacted in the last 5 or 6 weeks because of this slowdown?
We are concerned about every delivery that is late, and we're working very, very hard to get it back on track.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Grothman, you are now recognized.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. We are not seeing you yet, Mr. Grothman. There you are.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Okay. First of all, thank you for being here, Mr. DeJoy. Sorry, I think some of the questions have been unduly rude, but I'll start with a question here. What percent increase in regular mail deliveries do you anticipate because of the election this October, say, compared to last October?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What percent increase in mail deliveries do you expect this October compared to last October?
I think the election mail, it will run, it's about, over the course of a month, about 2% of normal mail.
Think about a 2% upper. Could you compare that to other days or times around Christmas, for example? Any other bump ups?
I think that the narrative goes like Mother's Day is higher, Christmas is higher. We've just handled census mail, so it's not a lot of mail, but it is critical. There are cutoff dates. It's not a Mother's Day card. It's a ballot, and it's important. So we put extra effort to make sure that it gets there on time.
Okay, but you don't consider it, say, compared to how much mail you had maybe 3 years ago, or the amount of mail on Christmas?
It's not a volume issue, sir. It's just that every ballot counts, so we want to get every one of them.
Okay. I know here in Wisconsin, I assume nationwide, there's postage that comes with the absentee ballots. As a matter of fact, in Wisconsin, there's postage going out and postage coming back. Do you have plans to do anything with the additional postage that you're going to get on the election?
You broke up, but I think I can guess at what you were trying to get at. We are not charging anything extra for anything. All our rates and classifications
That wasn't the point. That wasn't the point. in Wisconsin, the local unit of government that issues the absentee ballot pays to have the ballot sent out and actually puts a stamp on each ballot that's coming back. So at least in Wisconsin, you should be getting more revenue in with the election. What do you plan on doing with the additional revenue you're getting in? Or do you plan on doing something special at all?
I don't know. I'm not understanding how we would get extra revenue. One way or another, we would have had a stamp on it going out or a stamp on it coming back. In any case, the revenue will go to, any revenue we get, if it was additional revenue, will go to cover our losses.
I'm assuming that when you get additional revenue, you like it when more mail is being sent, probably because you have fixed costs, you're even ahead of the game. If you have more Valentine's Day cards or Christmas cards, or in this case, more absentee ballots or whatever.
We love
Is that
mail.
true? Right, so you should be happy, and are we happy? Good. Okay, that should put it on firmer grounds. You right now have, I'm told, about $14 billion in the bank. Do you anticipate the election causing that to be run down at all, or do you anticipate it going up? Will it have any dent on it?
No, I don't think it will have too much of an impact in either way.
Okay, so if you got $14 billion in the bank now, you're still going to have $14 billion on, as far as you know, on December 1st.
This depends. We lose. We will probably lose 10 or 11 billion dollars this year. So, depending on how package volume stays, we could have less cash. And if I may, having $14 billion and we also have. I have $12 billion worth of liabilities that need to be paid at some time over the next 6 months. We have $135 billion of liabilities. We're running a 633,000 person organization that does not get funding. Even though the federal government ends in September, they have an expectation of getting funding. We don't have an expectation of getting funding. So we have to drive costs out and increase revenue. And that's the big difference that we have than any other agency. So $14 billion, while it sounds like a lot of money, it's not a lot of money for what we do.
Right, but you anticipate still having money in the bank after the election. That's the point I'm trying to make.
We'll have cash, yes.
Gentleman's time has expired. The
Thank you
gentleman
very
may
much.
answer the question. Yeah. Okay.
We will, we have plenty of operating capital right now to get through November, yes, and handle the election.
Okay, the gentleman
Thank you
yields
very
back.
much.
Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. DeJoy, the culture and ethos of the U.S. Postal Service is every piece, every day. I've been in briefings with Florida's local Postal Service employees who are telling me that since your arrival, this is no longer the mission of the USPS. Overtime to finish delivering mail is not allowed, and piles upon piles of backlogged mail are being left undelivered. Sorting machines are being sold for scrap or unplugged and roped off. My first question is it still the policy and goal of the USPS to deliver every piece every day, or have you eliminated or changed that in any way?
First of all, that is misrepresentation of any action that I have taken. But yes, the goal is to deliver every piece every day. And ma'am, we were not doing that before I got here. And my goal is to.
Well, it's gotten, reclaiming my time, it has clearly gotten worse since your arrival. We have piles upon piles of mail that, as a result of the changes that you've made, appear to have delayed the mail even further than supposedly they were delayed previously.
Change.
No.
The change I've made.
Well, the changes that you've made.
Change. I made one change.
Well, I'm sorry, you've made far more than one change.
That's not true.
Okay, reclaiming my time. You're not being honest with this committee.
That's not true. I am being
Okay.
honest.
I would ask that the chair add time back and direct a witness not to interrupt me.
Madam Chair,
Mr. DeJoy?
allow the
sorry,
witness to answer the questions and the
reclaiming
false
my-
accusations.
Reclaiming my time. I did not interrupt any other member while they were talking, and I expect not to be interrupted. The time is mine. Mr. DeJoy, you are not being honest with the committee about removing the sorting machines. We have been asking you for details for weeks, and you have been hiding them from us while removing them at a breakneck pace. On August 4th, your staff gave this committee a briefing on this issue, and all they told us was that you'd be moving machines around to where they were needed most. We have the slides from that briefing. There was no mention of taking any sorting machines offline. On August 11th, your general counsel responded to our requests for more information with no mention of taking any sorting machines offline. Your culture of misinformation has even trickled down to Florida postal leadership. On August 14th, my office asked whether sorting machines were being removed at the Royal Palm facility, which covers all of South Florida, and were assured the capacity was actually being expanded. But it was only after I spoke with local postal workers that I was told about the FSS machine in Royal Palm, which had been shut down and roped off since July. Press outlets finally revealed the internal plan to remove more than 600 plus sorting machines. You were not transparent. We had to get it from news reports. I want to take this opportunity to enter into the record, Madam Chair, an August 18, 2020 email from USPS Director of Maintenance Operations, Kevin Couch. Madam Chair. The email reads, please message out to your respective maintenance managers tonight. They are not to reconnect, reinstall machines that have been previously been disconnected without approval from headquarters maintenance, no matter what direction they are getting from their plant manager. Mr. DeJoy, yes or no? And you've indicated in this committee hearing that it's not your job to decide about whether sorting machines are on or offline, but at the same time you told Mr. Khanna that you won't bring them online because they're not needed. So yes or no, have any plant managers requested mail sorting machines be reconnected?
First of all,
yes or no?
I disagree with the premise.
I'm not
that I
asking
have
you anything
directed
other
all
than
these things
reclaiming my
I've said.
time, Madam Chair.
Yeah, reclaiming
yes
their
or
time.
no?
Yes or no answer.
Yes or no, have any plant managers across the country in the USPS requested mail sorting machines be reconnected?
How would I know that?
You're in charge. You don't know whether there are plant managers that have requested. Well, let me
No,
just
I
let me
don't
just assure you that there are plant managers that was reported in the press in both Washington. There are plant managers in Texas and Washington, and I have articles that I can show you that have asked to have sorting machines reconnected and brought back online, and they've been too scared to come forward to say so. So you've indicated that it's local leadership. In this hearing, I heard you say it's not your job to decide whether sorting machines are brought online or not. Someone needs to mute, Madam Chair. Madam Chair,
Please mute people that are listening. Please mute.
I need probably about additional 30 seconds from the interruptions added back onto my time, please. You have said in this hearing it's both not your job to make decisions about sorting machines, and at the same time, you've said that you're not going to bring them back online because they're not needed. It can't be both. So my local handlers who work with sorting machines regularly and this specific barcode sorter machine have assured me that it would not be difficult to plug it back in. How difficult would it be to reconnect machines that haven't already been destroyed? For example, on display, if we can bring that up on the screen, I was sent a photo from a processing and distribution center in Florida where the power cord is hanging from the ceiling and not plugged in. And my local handlers tell me that with sorting machines regularly, and that specific machine specifically, that it would not be difficult to plug back in. Do you believe that it is the local handler's job to decide whether they need a sorting machine? And will you give them the freedom to plug the machines back in and bring machines that haven't been taken apart back online in order to make sure we can get the mail out on time, which you acknowledge has gotten worse since your arrival?
The gentlewoman's time has expired, but the gentleman is requested to answer a question.
That was a long list of accusations.
No, I just want a simple answer to the question about whether you will give...
Well, it's my time now? Is it my time to
No, it's
answer?
always my time. And I'd like an answer to the question...
Her time has expired.
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chairman.
I'd like an answer to the question whether or not you will
We have a
leave it...
management team that is responsible for making decisions as to what machines are used and not used.
But
okay?
those
So-
things are decided locally.
The
Will you
gentlewoman's
let them
time has
decide that
expired. The
locally?
gentlewoman's time has expired.
Yes or no? Will you let them decide that locally?
No.
Okay.
Congressman
Well, then
Higgins, you are now
then you have not told
recognized.
us the truth in this hearing, and it is your
Time has
fault that
expired,
the mail
Madam
has
Chairman.
delayed.
Her time has
Your
Your
expired.
fault.
Her time has
On you, and
expired.
you've acknowledged that.
Her time has
Yield back the
expired.
balance of
We
my
Her
expressed
time
a
has
response
expired.
in writing. Okay, Congressman Higgins, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was quite a debacle. This hearing right here is exactly why America does not trust Congress. Our cities are on fire. Violent mobs roam our streets at night. The Chinese have crushed the American economy with a virus, and Democrats are talking about a mailbox conspiracy. Postmaster General DeJoy, are you aware of any evidence whatsoever that supports a mail delivery conspiracy?
No, sir.
Would you repeat that, sir?
No, sir.
The question is answered. America needs to hear. Are you aware of any evidence whatsoever of some kind of a mailbox or mail delivery conspiracy?
I am not, sir.
Postmaster General, thank you for being here today. Let me ask you, are you here on subpoena or voluntarily?
I'm here voluntarily.
Well, you're a better man than me because you're sitting at attempt after attempt by my colleagues across the aisle to assassinate your character. And might I suggest to you, sir, as an American patriot and a constitutionalist, if I was you, I wouldn't appear before this committee without a subpoena in the future. Congratulations on your character for being here voluntarily to submit yourself to this harassment. During the course of your lifetime, sir, I'll be 59 today. I cannot remember a time when the Postal Service was not in some sort of financial trouble. Do you recall any time, sir, some sort of era that I'm not recalling that the Postal Service was totally squared away, operating within budget, and was never in financial trouble?
I think in the late 90s and early 2000, few years, it was covering its cost. And happy birthday, sir.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you. I recall the same. Out of the last 40, 50 years, there's only been a couple of years where there was anything that could be described as financial stability in the Postal Service. I mean, dedicated men and women, but the fact is that inefficiencies are legendary within the Postal Service. So let me just ask you, Postmaster, why did you accept this job? Tell America why you took this job.
Sir, I have a certain experience. I had the certain experiences in my life, business-wise, with large projects and large
So
logistical.
we know that you're qualified, sir. I get that.
Yeah.
But America needs to hear from your heart. Why did you accept this job, this incredible burden to serve your government in your nation in this way? What was your purpose?
I've been active in my community and the country most of my adult life, and this is something that was asked for me to participate in that I think I could help and fix and lead to a better place, and that's why I took it.
Well, from this American and from my constituents, thank you, sir, for taking on this burden and this task. One would think that perhaps next week the Oversight Committee will have a hearing suggesting that smoking cigarettes could cause cancer. Who did not know in America that the Postal Service is constantly going through modernization efforts, attempts to become more efficient, struggles to become solvent into the future? Now, you handle a lot of mail, do you not? I have one question in closing, sir. My understanding is you handle about 471 million pieces of mail a day. Can you handle the mail of the election cycle, given the fact that about 150 million Americans are registered to vote and your average mail delivery is 471 million a day? Can you handle the mail delivery for the election cycle, good sir?
The whole organization's committed to delivering election mail, and we will do it.
Roger that. Thank you, sir. Thank you for appearing before us today. I apologize on behalf of all of America for the way that you've been treated by my colleagues across the aisle. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Congressman Sarbanes, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Postmaster, for being here with us today. I'll be candid, I don't trust you right now. I don't know whether it's I don't trust your judgment or don't trust your motives. If you think you could implement the changes you did without having the negative impact that we've seen, then I worry about your judgment. And if you did understand what that impact would be, then I'm concerned about your motives. But you've got an opportunity here today to demonstrate to us that your judgment is sound and that your motives are pure. You're a businessman. We've heard a lot about that today. You're an expert, apparently, in supply chain management, which requires a lot of planning, specifics, details, all kinds of minutia, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. On Friday, when you were in the Senate, you said, quote, as we head into the election season, I want to assure the committee and the American public that the Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's election mail securely and on time. This sacred duty is my #1 priority between now and Election Day. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you said it again today, the idea of getting the mail to people securely and on time. I got to tell you, I'm very concerned about the issue of what's going to happen with the mailed ballots. We've heard that from others today. We have a president freely admitting that he is opposed to USPS funding because he's hoping that a hobbled Postal Service won't be able to handle mailed ballots. And your own general counsel has warned 46 states that mailed ballots may not be delivered on time. Traditionally, as you know, the Postal Service has always prioritized sorting election mail separately and pushing it out as fast as possible, including daily sweeps of mail facilities for any election mail otherwise missed in processing. Yet the states and localities have been left wondering if this is no longer the case and what the president's continued broadsides against mailed ballots will mean in practice for those efforts. On Friday, again, to the Senate colleagues of ours, you said first-class or better treatment of election mail would not change. Quoting you in response to Senator Peters, you said, yes, sir, we will deploy processes and procedures that advance any election mail, in some cases ahead of first-class mail. Now, we'll note that on the website there's an FAQ to election officials that says they should use first-class mail or a higher level of service for election mail. Using USPS marketing mail service will result in slower delivery times and may increase the risk that voters will not receive their ballots in time to return them by mail. So you're saying that the post office is going to handle this on a first-class basis, but at the same time the FAQ is telling election officials that they should take responsibility for this, or otherwise the marketing mail service will come in more slowly. So we've heard about your commitment to our Senate colleagues. You said it again today, but to be honest, Mr. Postmaster General, we need something in writing. That would be very helpful, a detailed accounting of how exactly you're going to execute on your promises. You're a specialist in logistics, so we want to know, what are you doing at USPS to make good on these words? How is USPS designing its interface with states and localities, with election mail vendors and others to assure that ballots get priority treatment? We need written policies and directives, not just words. I assume you know that USPS has long offered memorandums of policy to ensure the system-wide execution of key policies and procedures. I was looking at a bunch of these last night, and in that vein, I'm asking, can you commit today to the immediate issuance of a formal USPS policy in writing that will guarantee all delivery of election mail is treated as first class or better for the 2020 general election. Can you do that for us?
I don't, our process is to do that physically. I have to get back to you on what I can give you in writing on that.
We'd like to see that in the form of a memorandum so we can verify the commitment that you're making. This is where your motives can be shown to be pure. So if you could do that,
First-class
I
mail is a
appreciate
classification of mail, and then we're talking about a physical process. So there's, we could advance mail in front of first class, but it's still not called first-class mail.
I understand. I'm just asking to see in writing a memorandum on this that the post office and the public and we can get some confidence from. The other thing is, we've talked, I'm running out of time, but we talked about your ability to issue these reports. Could you commit as well today that you'll give us some data-specific updates on how the efforts regarding the mailed ballots are going, and do that on a periodic basis, weekly perhaps? That would be very, very helpful. Could you do that?
Yeah, what I'll do, sir, is I'll commit to give the committee an update on the improvement of the service, let's say next Monday, where we stand on the service, and I need to check if we can get down to the individual ballot level, see what we can do there.
That would be very helpful. I appreciate it. That will help demonstrate that you take this sacred duty seriously. I yield back.
If I can just add, the letters that went out to the state was not a warning or was not an indication that we would slow anything down. It was trying to educate the state election officials on what the process was. This has been done in years in past. With the pandemic, we increased the content because we knew the vote by mail would be higher. It's really, we've reached out to we've made 50,000 contacts with state and local officials in our regional areas and through headquarters to try and integrate their processes with our processes so we would have a safe and secure election.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. Congressman Gibbs, you are now recognized. Congressman Gibbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. DeJoy, I got to apologize to some of the behavior. Can you hear me? Because my thing went.
Yeah. We can hear you and we can see you.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I lost it. Okay. Postmaster General, I want to apologize for some of the treatment you had today. You know, obviously, by what I'm hearing, you don't really need this job. You didn't really take this job. And I'm not going to ask you directly if you did need to take this job. I'm assuming you did need to take this job, just like most people in the Trump administration, including the president, didn't need to take this job. But they did it for the love of country, and they want to make this country better and help people. And I think you fall into that category, so I want to apologize for some of the statements made today that were very disturbing to me. And you're just trying to do your job. When you were hired to this job by the Board of Governors, Mr. DeJoy, did you ever have any discussions with the President Trump on what to do to the post office or what you should do, or was it just with the Board of Governors?
I never spoke with the president about the Postal Service prior to getting the position, and I have not spoken to him about anything regarding the Postal Service since.
So you were brought in. So you were brought in to do this job that helps be more cost efficient, make changes. So obviously, Postal Service can do their job and get out of the red. And so you're doing your job, and now they come after you, attacking you for doing your job. Now we've seen, I think we all agreement that first-class mail has dropped considerably, but packages, or third-class, however you categorize it, has increased significantly. I think that's one of the reasons why you're making some changes to efficiency, cost efficiencies, and we've had a lot of discussion about the sorting machines. Now, is it true to say that for what the mail volume is, even with the additional census and the additional ballots, even though Christmas is higher mail time than anything else, there's still going to be enough sorting machines to do this, and you're also going to be able to move the packages by making the changes you're making? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, we will have plenty of sorting capacity.
Okay. Some of the other delays, COVID-19, what the absenteeism rate in the Postal Service. I saw there was an article here a couple months ago about the Postal Service took a very liberal policy about making sure that people don't come to work if they have a temperature. Obviously, that's probably made a lot of good common sense. Are we having trouble filling on a day-to-day basis, getting drivers and mailmen, getting a lot of shortages of personnel, or what's the situation with that?
Across the country, our employee availability is down 3 to 4% on average across the country. But the issue is in some of the hot spots in the country, areas like Philadelphia, Detroit, and there's probably 20. The averages cover that, and they're down. They could be down 20%, and that's given us. That is contributing to the delivery problem that we're having.
Yeah, you got challenges, and so I want to make that point. I believe the vast majority of our postal workers are honest public servants, and the Office of Special Counsel has found in many instances there's political bias. Back in the 2017 report, back in the 2016 campaign, they were biased towards Hillary Clinton. Considering the substantial increase in mail-in ballots this November, what steps do you think the Post Office is taking to ensure that political bias does not factor in the delivery of ballots? From that report.
I think I have not reviewed the report, but I have full confidence in the 650,000 men and women of the Postal Service that they will handle election mail safe and securely. Like the rest of the country, there are individuals that do things they shouldn't, and we have an inspection service and management team that look for that kind of stuff. But I have full faith that we will deliver on a safe and secure election.
I appreciate that. Some of the challenges you have in states, I know here in Ohio, in the primary election, people could request ballots to be mailed out to them on Saturday before the Tuesday election. And I think that is a real challenge, because I think a lot of states do that. So what's the Post Office doing to try to make sure, or working with states so people realize that if you request a ballot, on the weekend before Tuesday, the election, there might be a challenge in getting the ballot?
Expired. The gentleman may answer his question.
I think he asked, I couldn't hear, it was breaking up, but with regard to and that's one of the reasons that we are working with the state election officials to make sure and to educate the public. We will be sending a letter out to every American, again, with, describing our participation in the election process, and again, requesting to request their ballot early and to vote early. But when it gets down to those last days, that last day, we will have various procedures, sweep procedures, expedited. I mean, I've heard stories of postal managers running ballots over to the election board. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure every ballot gets where it needs to be.
Thank you. Congressman Welsh, you are now recognized. Congressman Welsh.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Postmaster General DeJoy, and I want to thank the chairman of the board, Mr. Duncan, for your patient answering of our questions. As both of you know, it was President Nixon in 1970 who signed a very major postal reform bill to guarantee the independence of the post office. And on the Postal Service website, its history speaks about that bill as something that was to, quote, remove the Postal Service from politics. And I assume that both of you agree that that is an essential mission of the post office.
Yes, sir.
Mr. DeJoy, I'll ask you. All right. And Mr. DeJoy, I have asked for a document labeled DeJoy Political Donations chart to be presented, and I want to ask you a few questions about that. Mr. DeJoy, I mean, obviously you have the right to make political donations within the law, and I have no dispute with that. But I do want to go through them because of these questions that are being raised. According to the Federal Election Commission records, since 2016, you've donated $3.2 million to Republican candidates and committees. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right, yep.
Yeah, and the Republican National Committee was the beneficiary of $1.3 million in contributions, correct?
Yes, I am a Republican, sir.
Right. And you contributed $1.2 million to President Trump's Trump Victory Fund, correct?
I would need to check that, but it sounds about right.
Okay. And my understanding is that in May of 2019, you were announced as the chairman of the Republican National Convention fundraising committee for the convention that was to take place in Charlotte. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a not-for-profit foundation that was selected by the Charlotte Host Committee, which is usually a bipartisan in conventions for the city.
Right, and that you stayed on that position until June 12, 2020, shortly before you took over officially as the Postmaster General, correct?
I did, sir.
Right. And in June, from January to April of this year, in the run-up before you were selected as Postmaster General, you provided 18 contributions in the amount of about $650,000 to various Republican committees, correct?
You seem to have something in front of you. I don't know what you're looking at, but I give a lot of money. Let's go for the record. I give a lot of money to Republicans.
Right. And let me just ask an obvious question. You obviously support the Republicans. That's obvious. It's totally within your right. You're a big supporter of President Trump. Totally within your right. How do you square being a major supporter of the president and Republican committees and other members with the independence that's required of the Postmaster General? Can you really do both?
Absolutely, sir.
Well, you're aware of the fact, of course, that President Trump has made very hostile statements about the Postal Service. He called the Postal Service a joke. I assume you disagree with that?
I do, sir.
And he has also vehemently and repeatedly attacked mail-in voting, saying, and I'll quote, "Mail-in ballots will lead to massive electoral fraud and a rigged 2020 election." Do you agree with that?
I'm in charge of delivering ballots. I don't really want to comment on what, that's not my responsibility, electoral. I'll leave that to the states.
It's not, but there, is it your view that if there is fraud, it will have nothing to do with the United States Postal Service?
It is my view that if there is if there is fraud, it's our attempt not to have any fraud do with the United States Postal Service, yes.
But if the mail is not delivered on time, and Republicans and Democrats who do vote by mail do not have a timely delivery of that ballot to their town clerks, that in fact will result in them being disenfranchised. Is that not correct?
The mail will be delivered on time, sir.
Well, we've heard that you have made significant reforms to try to improve Postal Service, but it's resulted in significant delays. And those delays have coincided, of course, with the run-up to the election. We've heard, and you've apologized for that. It's not just the postal boxes, the blue boxes, the mail sorting machines, but you heard from Congressman Cooper that the requirement about trucks leaving at a certain time.
The gentleman's time has expired, but the gentleman may answer the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. Again, I'll repeat, I had nothing to do with the collection boxes, the sorting machines, the post office hours, or limiting overtime. The change I made was ask the team to run the trucks, transportation on time, and mitigate extra trips based on a review of an OIG audit that was absolutely astonishing in the amount of money we were spending and the number of late trips and extra trips we were running. It was a plan that was rolled out with operations, and it's a very, very important aspect of the network. It's a very, people ask why do trucks matter? Why do on-time trucks matter? They do matter. It's a fundamental premise of how the whole mail network is put together. If the trucks don't run on time, the mail carriers can't leave on time. They're out there at night. They have to come back and get more mail. Collection processes are late. Plant processes are distorted. I see several $1 billion in potential savings in getting the system to connect properly, and that's why we ran out and put a plan together to really get this fundamental basic principle: run your trucks on time. I find it really, I would not know how to reverse that now. Am I to say, don't run the trucks on time? Is that the answer that we're looking to get me to say here today?
I think the question was, why don't we fill the trucks
the gentleman's
before
time
they
has expired. Now we recognize Congressman Keller. You are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would like to thank the Postmaster General DeJoy for being here today. On July 29, 2020, the USPS General Counsel sent a follow-up letter from May to 46 states, including Pennsylvania, expressing concern that the state's deadlines for requesting and casting ballots by mail do not fit with the Postal Service's delivery standards. Mr. DeJoy, can you confirm that these letters and outreach to state election offices is something USPS has done in the past under previous Postmasters General?
Yes, this has been done in the past. I looked at a letter about a week ago that was sent out, before the 2016 election also. But we have intensified the effort to work with the election boards and to communicate with the election boards to help them gain more knowledge on what our process is. It's really been amazing to me in this experience how many people in high places don't really understand what a how we use a postmark.
Well, I think, I would agree with that. Also, the Democrats have been making a lot of noise about these letters your general counsel sent to state election boards. I'd like to clear this up. In the letters to the states, does the USPS say that they will not deliver ballots this November?
No, sir.
Do they say that, do the letters state that the USPS will not or cannot process ballots this November?
No, sir, it doesn't.
Do they say that the voters should not vote by mail?
No, sir, it doesn't.
Okay. Specifically, the letter recommends that voters mail, people voting by mail should complete their ballots no later than, or complete and submit their ballots no later than October 27th to comply with Pennsylvania, or to comply. Pennsylvania would need to change current law, which allows voters to request a ballot as late as Tuesday, October 27th. To ensure that the USPS can deliver completed ballots in time to be counted by Election Day on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 by 8 p.m., as it is required under Pennsylvania law. Do you agree that Pennsylvania should move the application deadline for mail and absentee ballots back, for example, on or around October 19th to request the ballot in order to ensure voters can receive their ballots in time and complete them and return them no later than Tuesday, October 27th, as recommended by the Postal Service or the Postal Service's General Counsel?
I didn't catch all of the details.
Well, basically,
it would be best if the state election boards follow the recommendations of our general counsel to ensure that every ballot, we're still going to do everything that we need to do, but I don't know why we would want to put this in conflict. It's a very important process in the democracy, and I don't know why we should take any chance other than have a properly integrated system between the election boards and the Postal Service. And that's all the general counsel and the team that supports them is trying to do, make people aware. Why would we want to put more risk in the system than is necessary?
Well, Pennsylvania law states that the ballots are to be received by November 3rd by 8 p.m. Anybody that's reasonable, I mean, I'm 55 years old, and I've used the Postal Service for the past 37 years. to deliver my mail, to pay my bills, to do everything. And I don't wait till the day the bill is due to mail the check. I mail it in enough time, knowing that it's only reasonable that I have to walk to the mailbox. I have to put it in the mailbox. Somebody has to come collect it. It has to be put in a car or on a plane and taken to another place to be processed and delivered. It's only reasonable that the states should take that into account when they set up their laws. So I'm going to keep moving on because there's another point I'd like to get to also. Governor Tom Wolf recently announced that Pennsylvania will cover the cost of postage for every mail-in ballot this year. The United States Postal Service handbook for area mail processing guidelines states that postmarks are not required for mailings bearing a pre-canceled stamp for postage. In other words, envelopes with prepaid postage that Pennsylvania send with the ballots to be returned, will they be postmarked?
We're going to work to try and set up a process to postmark as much as we can.
Is it currently as a process? Is it currently
prepaid postage does not get processes that prepaid postage does not get postmarked.
So it could, if nothing were to change, which the chairwoman's bill said you can't change anything. So if nothing were to change, you wouldn't be able to postmark those
Yeah,
letters.
if we didn't make a special effort to postmark prepaid mail, we would not be postmarking. Now, we have certain other ways of identifying election mail, which is how we have done in the past to try and postmark things, but they're not seamless efforts. So,
You would have to make some adjustments to be able to make sure that's secure.
yes, sir.
I would sincerely hope that the chairwoman of this committee would have thought of that, and that would have been the value of having this hearing before she introduced the bill saying you can't make any changes. Because you're trying to do things to make sure that the items you handle are done in time. So I do appreciate that. The one thing, Postmaster General, can you guarantee that you will deliver every ballot to the people when they request them and every ballot when it's returned? I guarantee we will use every effort of 650,000 people that work at the organization to fulfill that obligation. You won't change anything this election that you've done previously.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Gentleman can answer the question. Or,
I think I did.
Congresswoman Spear is recognized. You're now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two documents I'd like to submit for the record. One from the Postal Service on the reorganization and one from Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Joy, thank you so much for being here today. You have answered some questions about your contributions to the President. You also contributed $586,000 to attend a dinner for him in February of this year. Is that correct?
I don't think so, no.
Well, there's records that show you did. Your wife has also been nominated to be the ambassador to Canada. Is that correct?
She is, yes.
All right. Mr. Duncan, wherever you are.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan, you have also been active in President Trump's campaign and as the director of American Crossroads Super PAC. Is that correct?
I am the director of American Crossroads Super PAC, yes.
And you've contributed over $1.9 million to President Trump's campaign.
That's not correct.
Not you personally, but the PAC.
I don't know the answer.
For the records show that. So you're both vested in making sure that the president gets reelected. Is that correct?
I'm not here to talk about the president's election. I'm here to talk about Postal Service issues.
Okay. Mr. Duncan, how much did the Postal Service pay Russell Reynolds to be the company to look for a replacement?
I don't have that number. I'd be happy to try to provide it for you.
All right. In your own testimony, you said they started with 212, they then vetted 50, and they got down to the first round interviews, and there were 14. But Mr. DeJoy was not one of them. So we paid this company to do a national search for the replacement for the USPS, Postmaster General. He was not in that group. But Mr. Barger, I guess Mr. Barger said, well, we have another candidate. Did you recommend Mr. DeJoy as a candidate?
Let me go back on your premise that he wasn't included. We were still taking recommendations at that point of time before the first interview
All right.
process had gone in.
Mr. Duncan,
So
just
he
answer the question. Did you recommend Mr. DeJoy as a candidate?
I gave Mr. DeJoy's name as a candidate, as I did with other candidates. I submitted it through the process.
All right, but he was not part of what was provided to you by the search firm. Let's move on. The President has been very critical of Amazon and the contract they have with the Postal Service, Mr. DeJoy. Have you reviewed that contract?
I have not reviewed the contract specifically in any detail now.
Well, but you did offer some testimony, I believe, in the Senate that suggested that you had, in fact, reviewed it and that you thought that the rates were...
The question was about rates, right? There's a contract. Contracts are thick. I'm studying the rate building process of the Postal Service on the NSAs. That's what I...
So you did look at Amazon's rates?
I did look at Amazon's rates.
All right.
Yes.
On your statement of financial...
As long as hundreds of other...
I understand.
Okay.
In your statement of financial disclosure, you sold your Amazon stock on June 22nd, I believe, and then you purchased options on Amazon on June 24th. That would suggest to almost anyone that there is a conflict of interest. It doesn't require that you make a decision. It only requires that you participate. Did you check with the Government Office of Ethics to see if that was appropriate?
Before I went in the Postal Service, you file your forms the day you arrive at work. I filed my forms. I was going to a meeting on Amazon. I own stock someplace in a call at Morgan Stanley, and they told me I had to either recuse myself from reviewing a number of contracts or sell the stock. I called our broker to sell the stock. We actually had calls.
Well, Mr. DeJoy, I'm going to have to.
But I did not buy options. I actually bought covered calls back. I bought covered calls back and at a loss. That's what I did to get it completely out of stock. I had to unwind covered calls.
You still have those calls, do you not?
No.
You have.
I had to pay more money for the calls than I sold them for. I think you should get an understanding of what a covered call is before you accuse me of any improprieties.
All right. I think, let me just ask one last question. Have you removed any machines that automate the postmarking process?
I have not removed any machine.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman may answer.
I have not, I'll repeat again, for the 100th time, I have not removed any machines.
Well, that's separate from the sorting machine.
Congresswoman Miller, you
Any
are now
machine.
recognized.
I'll repeat, I have not removed any machines.
Congresswoman Miller, you are
Can you
now
hear me?
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and thank you, Ranking Member Comer, and a special thank you to our esteemed guest today for taking the time to participate in this so-called hearing. Postmaster DeJoy and Chairman Duncan, my constituents in rural West Virginia rely on the Postal Service to receive their essential prescriptions, their mail, and their packages. Thank you for your continued work during the pandemic to ensure that these critical services continued. In a year that is riddled with conspiracy theories, such as baseless claims of Russian collusion, we are wasting another hearing opportunity to attack our duly elected president over the most blatant and verifiably false claim that Republicans are destroying the United States Postal Service. This couldn't be further than the truth. Everyone knows that the Postal Service needs a serious overhaul, but bailing out our Postal Service without instituting any necessary reforms is not the answer. Democrats here today are doing a great disservice to our postal workers and undermining American confidence in our electoral process. The Postmaster General has said repeatedly that the USPS will have no difficulty delivering ballots. but my colleagues across the aisle place the blame on the Postal Service instead of their own state's incompetence to properly hold their own elections. The USPS can handle the absentee and mail-in ballots from the 2020 election and has enough money to remain solvent well into next year, giving the Postmaster General and Congress time to work on a solution to put the USPS back on a sustainable path. While all of us here today recognize that the Postal Service is an essential duty of the federal government, there seems to be only one party that is serious about making sure that it works effectively for the American people. Postmaster DeJoy, on average, how many pieces of mail does the United States Postal Service deliver in a day?
About 451 million pieces, ma'am.
Thank you. If every single eligible voting age American voted by mail in a single day, about 153 million or so, would that United States Postal Service be able to ensure that these pieces of mail were delivered?
I think we have adequate capacity to handle the mail, the election, yes.
And you would be able to do this without significant impact to your normal day-to-day operations?
You're asking me one day. I have not done that analysis, but the way ballots flow throughout the week, we would handle it very easily.
Thank you. However, you cannot control what deadlines states set in terms of requesting and returning ballots, or how long it takes for these election boards to count the ballots to call a race. Isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
We saw huge delays in election results in New York, as I'm sure the chair is well aware. The core issue why you are here today, Mr. Postmaster General, is to ensure that every American has their right to vote fully protected. What is becoming abundantly clear is that the Trump administration, Republicans in Congress, and the USPS are not obstacles to that right. Rather, you are helping to ensure voting access despite incompetence and partisanship on the part of a great many state election officials across the country. Last week, a scathing analysis by NPR found that at least 550,000 mail-in ballots were rejected in the presidential primary elections earlier this year. Of those, nearly half of those rejected ballots came from New York, New Jersey, and California, where there isn't a single Republican in statewide office. This November, we must ensure that all Americans can and should be able to vote safely in person at their local polling locations, and those that do need absentee ballots can and should be able to vote securely through the USPS as they have in past elections. I hope colleagues and our counterparts at the state level heed the recommendation of the USPS on how to execute this undertaking free from politics and partisanship. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Congresswoman Kelly. You are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been on this committee for over 7 years, 5 years in the minority. The hypocrisy around how witnesses are treated and around the post office is astounding. Thank you for being here, Mr. DeJoy. Small businesses are a vital part of the United States economy. They represent nearly 75% of all employers and account for 44% of all economic activity. Small businesses, many without significant savings or access to credit, have relied on the Postal Service to stay afloat during this pandemic. The Postal Service plays an important role, as you know, in enabling their growth and commercial success. Last Friday, you testified before the Senate committee, and I quote, "You feel bad about the dip in our service." Well, there are a few businesses that feel pretty bad, too. Cassidy Lavender, a Louisiana business owner, was forced to abandon the Postal Service after losing nearly $10,000 due to his shipping delays. Beth Nolan, a Michigan business owner, had to fire an employee to recoup the costs spent making up for her delivery delays. A 2013 OIG report found that small businesses are a key customer segment for the Postal Service, generating more than $9 billion in annual revenue. Before implementing the numerous operational changes discussed here today, were there any analysis performed on the impact such changes would have on these key customer this key customer segment?
There was not numerous operational changes. There was one request that we adhere to our transportation schedule, and I did not perform any operational analysis myself, but we had a team looking at how we would plan to roll out the change. And that team was across the whole country, an existing team, not a new team. I'm unaware, I don't know how much analysis we would need to do to comply with our schedules that were already established.
Thank you. It seems decisions were made without taking into account the real-world impacts. A beauty salon in my district has not received mail for a week to 10 days. The owner is concerned about bills that might be delivered late, which can have a terrible impact on their business. Another person I spoke to said she receives her mail now every other day and still hasn't received a check she's relying on. When I went to the post office myself to mail a package, the postal workers there said, "We know who you are and we just want to apologize, but we're just doing what we're told." I didn't get those phone calls when President Obama was the president. Will you commit here today to reversing any policy or practice that has the effect of slowing down mail and package delivery? I represent the Chicagoland area, and I'm hearing from postal people themselves, and they want you to address the lack of staffing and the late start times, which they feel has greatly impacted the delivery of the mail.
Ma'am, we're very, very concerned about every delayed package or piece of mail, and we are also very interested in fostering the support of small business. What I can tell you is we're working very hard to